Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video we're back with a new Survivor What If video, this time talking about what if every player was on the jury. So obviously we will be running through every season of Survivor US and talking about who I think the pre-jurors would have voted for had they been on the jury, and through that see who would have won in all of these scenarios. And that, let's jump right into it with the first season of the show in Survivor Borneo, where here I do feel like there are certain people that lean in different ways. I think Sonia is a pretty locked in vote for Rich. I think BB is probably a vote that leans Rich, considering he seemed to care a lot about the survival elements of the game. But I think every other pre-juror boot probably leans towards Kelly. I mean, I think Stacy is a locked Kelly vote. Gretchen is a locked Kelly vote. Ramona is someone that could go either way, but considering most of Pagong went for Kelly, I feel like Ramona's probably more inclined to vote for Kelly. And also, I would assume they would have more in common. Dirk is someone that had a big crush on Kelly, so I could see that vote going to Kelly as well. So with all this essentially makes it a 6-6 tie, with Joel as the big swing here. And again, I don't really know where he goes. I mean, obviously all of Joel's old Pagong members, or at least most of them, went for Kelly. However, I can definitely see him respect the more survival elements of Rich. So again, I feel like it could go either way. However, for the sake of argument here, considering the fact that his number one ally in Jervis does end up going for Kelly, let's just say that Joel goes for Kelly, and through that, Kelly wins. Why not? Now for Australian Outback, we again have some people that are pretty locked in. I feel like Mad Dog is a pretty locked in Tina vote, you would think. I think Kimmy probably leans Tina as well, considering supposedly they would talk before challenges, and that's supposedly where the rumor of like how Tina knew to put the votes on Varner. I would assume that Jeff and Scoopin probably both lean towards Colby, considering that's the type of player that they would respect. So that does leave Mitchell, Kel, and Deb as pretty big swing votes here. And really, Colby would need all three of them to win. And I do think he is inclined to probably get Kel. Mitchell would have to be determined on, like, does he feel burned by Colby or not? And then Deb is just a massive wild card, to where, again, like, I do think at the end of the day, Tina is more likely to win this final two scenarios still, but again, it really could go either way. Now for Survivor Africa, and really, I think a lot of these people could go either way. I think Linda is someone that I could definitely see voting for Kim. I think someone that would respect an older woman making it to the end. Everyone else could go either way. I mean, Carl is someone that, considering he was closely aligned to Frank, and Frank ends up going for Ethan, I think he probably goes Ethan. Clarence didn't like either of them, but I think he would lean Ethan. Lindsay, I guess, could go Kim, considering her two allies in Brandon and Kim Powers both go Kim. Silas could go Ethan as, like, okay, respect for taking me out, but I think there's also a chance that, again, he goes for Kim, considering that's where all of his other allies are going. Jesse, I'm probably inclined to think probably goes Ethan, but again, it's really up in the air. And again, who knows about Diane? Now, Ethan only really needs 2 votes here to win. I think he's pretty inclined to get Carl, and then really just through Jesse, Diane, or Clarence, he already wins the game. So again, I'm still inclined to think Ethan wins here. Next up for Marquesas, we do have Nalia having some locked-in votes here in Gina and Gabriel, who are a lot closer to Nalia. I think Vesepia is probably more inclined to get Rob, Sarah, and probably Hunter, probably Peter as well, to where this really gives Vesepia a massive advantage. Obviously, due to a lot of her original tribe being pre-jurors here. The only vote I'm a bit unsure about is Patricia, to where she did spend time with Vesepia, but didn't really seem to have that close a relationship to her. But I do think she's probably more inclined to go for Vesepia, meaning Vesepia wins in a 9-5 vote here. Now for Thailand, I think this is probably the hardest one so far, where really I feel like everyone is up for grabs. Like, I really don't know. Now, obviously, the general perception coming into it is that, okay, Brian would be more respected, especially from these people that didn't end up meeting Brian or Clay, considering Brian is obviously the person that was perceived as the most alpha there, and also the person that was winning the most challenges. So, like the Rob, Stephanie, and Jeds of the world, again, considering they never met either of them, I think they would be inclined to vote for Brian. Sheehan could really go either way. though I think would lean Brian. Gandia, Tanya, John, I would expect them to also lean Brian. Like, again, it's a lot of like, just, I'm expecting them to vote for Brian. But again, it really could go either way for a lot of these people, but I still do think Brian wins. And probably by a much wider margin than how he won in real life. Next up, moving on to the Amazon, and I think both of them have pretty locked in votes. I think Matthew has the locked votes of Roger, Daniel, and Ryan, all people he was closer to. Jenna obviously has Shauna. And then we have Jean, Joanna, and Janet as people in the middle. I think they're probably inclined to go for Jenna, considering they were obviously on Jenna's original tribe. But, I mean, to be fair, they didn't really like Jenna that much while there. So, again, it really could go either way. But I am inclined to still think they go for Jenna, especially on a season build as men versus women. I feel like that would lead to these women with less of a vested interest from early on, probably leaning towards the women's side of things. Next up for Pearl Islands, I think this is probably a pretty simple one. I think Skinny Ryan votes for Lil. I think everyone else votes for Sandra. Really, Savage, Austin, Sean, Michelle, Nicole, all should be locked votes for Sandra. I don't think there's any way they vote for Lil, partially due to a lot of them being annoyed by Lil, also due to the fact of not respecting Lil for coming back into the game. I do think that leaves Trish as the only, like, kind of maybe, considering Trish didn't seem to hate Lil based on the outcast vote, but still, I do feel like Trish is still probably leaning Sandra, considering at least she spent time with Sandra on the island. Now for All-Stars, and here we get some pretty interesting votes here. I mean, I think Jerry and Ethan are absolutely locked for Amber. I think those aren't changing. I think Rich and Tina are probably locks for Rob. Rich having respect for Rob's game, and Tina due to being anti-Amber. Sesternino could go either way, though I do think he leans towards Rob because I feel like he would respect it by the end of the season. And I think the same thing goes for Jenna, where Jenna doesn't really have much incentive to vote for either of them. So I think she probably goes Rob. Really, Rudy and Sue to me are the biggest unknowns here, where they really could go either way and have no real vested interest outside of, I guess, Sue with like being on the same tribe as both of them, but like she also didn't really like either of them. So, yeah, it really could go either way with them. But at this point, Rob would only need one of their votes in order to win, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he would get one of Rudy or Sue, so Rob could probably win this scenario. Next up for Vanuatu, we obviously have some locked-in votes for Chris. We do have Rory and Bubba, and really, I feel like everyone else is kind of unknown. I mean, the two Johns, Brady, and Brooke, I think are likely Chris votes. But considering they were on the opposite side of Chris's alliance, I don't think they're absolutely locked in, especially John Kenny, who in particular was burned by Chris. You also have Elisa, Mia, and Dolly, who, like, were not big Twyla fans, so I don't know if they're voting for Twyla. I mean, either way, I do think Chris probably wins very handily here, but I do think a lot of these votes are kind of unknowns. But I do find it tough to see Twyla getting many votes from these other people. So again, I think it's a pretty clear-cut Chris win. Now for Palau, and I mean, I think at this point we're getting like a near unanimous Tom vote here. I mean, I think Bobby, John, and Willard are pretty locked in voting for Tom. And then I think really the rest of the cast is pretty likely Tom votes. You got Ibrahim, James, Angie, Kim, Jeff, Ashley, Jolanda, the entire Oolong tribe. I think they're all pretty likely Tom votes. I think they would all respect Tom's physical prowess, and that being what defeated them, especially considering they didn't really get much time to speak with Katie, so I don't think they would really feel much attachment there. And I think Jonathan and Wanda, I guess, are pretty likely Tom votes, because why not? I think Tom wins near unanimously. Now for Guatemala, and really I feel like Danny's in a similar boat, but due to an anti-returnee sentiment, where I really feel like almost everyone here is a locked Danny vote. I think Brandon's locked, Amy, Margaret, Blake, Brooke, Jim, all locked Danny votes. I think Brian is likely a Danny vote, especially considering Danny did spare him for one round, and really who knows where Brianna and Morgan go, but considering the anti-returnee sentiment that was on this season, I'm inclined to think they go for Danny as well. Now for Panama, and really I feel like Aris gets most of the votes here. I think Nick is a locked Aris vote. I think Bob Dog's a locked Aris vote. I think Dan's a very likely Aris vote, which that alone already puts him at 8 votes there. That's enough to win. I do think Danielle could get Ruth Marie, probably gets Misty, Maybe you could get Melinda and Tina, but it's like at the end of the day, it shouldn't really matter. Ours should still easily win this. Now for Cook Islands, and I think this is a situation that does greatly benefit Aussie at this point, where I think Aussie would get the votes of Flicka and Cowboy, who would have felt burned by Yule, and also were just also closer personally to Aussie. JP and Cecilia were his 2 alliance members that were booted, so he's going to get their votes. I do think Yule could probably get Christina Coria, considering she was anti-Aussie, and probably Billy along with that, which essentially means that Stephanie and Sekou are the swings, where Aussie only needs 1 of their votes. And I do feel like Stephanie is someone that is likely to vote for Aussie, considering the rest of Herero tribe was already leaning Aussie. So I do feel like Aussie is inclined to win this scenario. Now for Fiji, we have what really should be a near unanimous Earl win still. I think he for sure gets the votes of Anthony, Rita, Sylvia, Erica, and Jessica, where I feel like Gary and Liliana are the 2 people that are up in the air. I could see a world where Gary votes for Dreams, considering I feel like they were somewhat close, but even then, not necessarily a guarantee. Liliana, who really knows where she goes? But still, I feel like Earl will still have the consensus vote here. Next up for Survivor China, and I think this is a situation that actually does greatly benefit Courtney, where I think Todd probably gets Aaron's vote here, but outside of that, I think the other votes might lean Courtney. I think Sharia is a very likely Courtney vote. I think Leslie would have been burned by Todd and Amanda to where she would probably vote for Courtney, and at that point, the 3 early Zanhu boots who never met any of the final 3, and they're really up for grabs here, but Dave, I feel like, is someone that would probably lean Amanda, is kind of what I would guess. Ashley could really go anywhere, and really same thing with Chicken, but if Courtney does get the votes of Ashley and Chicken there, she does win this season. So I do think she is someone that is greatly benefited from having more jurors here and could potentially win this. Next, for Micronesia, we do have, again, more up for grab votes. I do think Kathy and Penner are probably likely Parvati votes. While Parvati and Penner didn't have the greatest relationship on this season, and really the previous season either, they at least did have some sort of connection and did have some respect for her gameplay. So I think that's probably where he'll go. I think Amy is a likely Amanda vote, considering they spent more time together. But again, really everyone else is so up for grabs. Tracy, Chet, Joel were all with Amanda longer, but all didn't have the greatest relationships with Amanda, especially Tracy and Chet, who were trying to flip the game on Amanda. Mikey B and Mary, again, also could go either way, though considering I believe Mikey B and Parvati were close out of the game, I feel like maybe they would be inclined to go towards Parvati. Yao, I guess, would go towards Parvati just because Penner would, which is even in itself up for grabs. So again, not really that solid. Fair play could go either way. Really, this is a bit of a train wrecky vote. However, I am inclined to think Parvati has the advantage, but really a lot of votes here are very much up for grabs and don't really have a solid answer. Next up for Gabon, we do have someone like a Jackie, who I think is inclined to vote for Bob. She was aligned with him in the Onion Alliance, so I think that's probably where she'll go. I think Jillian and JC are probably leaning towards Susie. But then I feel like we have a lot of people who are a bit more up for grabs in Dan, Ace, Kelly, and Paloma, who I do think are probably all leaning Bob, but not 100%. And then Michelle Chase, really, who knows where she goes. I do think it is a bit of a train wrecky vote here. However, I am inclined to think that Bob might have the advantage, as again, I do feel like the Ace, Kelly, Paloma grouping there would have more reasons to vote for Bob than Susie, but again, still a bit up in the air. Next up for Tocantins, we do have some locked votes for certain people. I think Spencer is pretty likely voting for Steven, considering he didn't have the greatest relationship with JT. I think Joe and Sydney are both pretty locked in for JT, to which, already JT has already won the game, but the Sandy, Jerry, Candace, Carolina group, I think could go either way. I believe Sandy had a closer relationship with Steven, though I think she could respect JT a bit more. Jerry and Candace, really no clue at all where they go. Carolina, I know Steven talked about how bad of a relationship he had with Carolina to where maybe she goes JT, but again, really up in the air, but I do think JT wins this pretty handily still. Next up for Samoa, and here we do have a couple locked Russell votes where I do think Mike Barassi and Ben are very likely voting for Russell. I do think we have someone like an Ashley and a Liz who are probably leaning towards Russell, considering I don't feel like they felt that bitter at the time of their vote outs. But then I feel like we have a decent amount of votes that do lean Natalie. I feel like Russell Swan would obviously vote with the rest of his galoos for Natalie. I don't think Yasmin was ever voting for Russell, considering how he treated her at the Fofo camp. And then we have Betsy and Marisa, two people who were very anti-Russell at the time of their vote outs. So again, I do feel like Natalie still is inclined to win this, probably in something like an 11-6 vote here. Next up, for heroes versus villains, we do have some people that I think would vote for Russell. I mean, Sari has confirmed herself that she would vote for Russell if she had a vote in this scenario. James is someone that Russell had some connective tissue to where I think James could definitely vote for Russell, especially because I feel like he would be anti-Parvati. I do think a couple of the villains in Tyson and Randy would probably lean towards Parvati, considering they at least had some respect for how she played the game. However, then I do feel like the Tom and Stephs of the world would probably vote for Sandra, considering they seem to have respect for Sandra. And I think Boston Rob would probably also vote for Sandra, considering his close relationship to her. Though I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility of him voting for Parvati. And then we have Sugar, which is who knows where Sugar goes. But just by this breakdown, Sandra already has 9 of the 17 votes here, so she should still win this scenario. Next up, for Nicaragua, we have a couple locked-in Fabio votes in my eyes. I do think Jill is someone that was obviously very close to Marty, who was very pro-Fabio, so I think she goes there. Shannon would probably be locked in for Fabio, considering he's very anti-Sash and Chase. I do think Kelly B also leans Fabio in this situation, though could definitely see her being annoyed at Fabio for flipping on her. But really, the rest of the votes are really up for grabs, considering only Eve and Tyrone had even met any of the final 3, and them only having met Chase. But again, the Jimmy T, Jimmy Johnson, and Wendy's of the world don't really know exactly where they're going. I mean, I am inclined to think Jimmy Johnson probably votes for Chase, considering Chase at least mentioned that he was a big fan. So, I mean, that's something. I think Wendy and Chase at least have somewhat similar backgrounds to where I could see that being a factor in the vote there as well. And if Chase does get the Eve and Tyrone votes, that would mean that Jimmy T is the deciding vote here, where I really don't know where he would go, but considering his allies in Jane and Holly do vote for Chase, maybe he's inclined to vote for Chase. So maybe Chase would barely pull out this win, but again, it is a very, very wonky vote. Next up, for Redemption Island, and I mean, here I think Rob wins pretty handily. I mean, I think Stephanie, Krista, Russell, Christina, and Francesca are all locked Rob votes. I think the only one that could vote against Rob is Sarita, considering Sarita was close to Ralph, and Ralph was very anti-Rob. But even then, it won't really matter, and even then, I think she probably still would vote for Rob. So again, Rob should win pretty handily here. Next up, for South Pacific, I feel like Sophie would probably also get all of the votes here. I feel like Christine, Michaela, and Stacy are all anti-coach and threw that vote for Sophie. I feel like Elise is going to vote with her Savai members in voting for Sophie. And then we get Papa Bear and Semhar, who are a bit more up for grabs. But I mean, Sophie already has the clear advantage in this vote. Again, probably handily wins this. Now for One World, and this one doesn't have as many locked-in votes. I feel like Colton is a very likely vote for Sabrina. However, I feel like everyone else could go either way. I mean, we have Monica, Bill, Matt, Nina, Courtney. I could definitely see Monica, Nina, and Courtney going for Sabrina. I feel like that grouping could definitely respect a player like Sabrina. Though at the same time, I mean, again, they could also vote for Kim. It really is a bit of an unknown. I think Matt is probably inclined to respect someone like a Kim, someone that is going to win challenges, a bit more of an alpha player. Really don't know about Bill. I mean, again, could go Kim, could go Sabrina, really could go either way. I mean, I still think Kim wins, considering Kim would literally only need 1 vote to still pull out the win. I feel like she would probably get Matt, but again, definitely chances for Sabrina to get a lot of votes there. Now moving on to Philippines, and I think this is another situation where Denise might get every vote here. I mean, obviously Denise was on the same tribe as all these people, while Scoop and Lisa were never on the same tribe as any of these people. However, through this, I do think Zane is a likely Denise vote. I think Angie is a very likely Denise vote. A bit unsure on Roxy. I could see Roxy going for Lisa, considering Roxy was very religious and Lisa's very religious, but again, could go either way. Russell, I think, would be determined on, is he bitter or not. I could definitely see him being upset at Denise for voting him out, and through that voting for probably Scoopin as the other returnee, but again, up in the air. And then I think the Dana, Dawson, Katie contingent votes as a group. And again, like they only knew Denise, so I think that's probably a step up for them. But I mean, really, who truly knows? But again, Denise should very handily win this jury vote. Next up for Caramoan, here we have some locked votes. I feel like Corinne would easily vote for Dawn. I feel like Cochran would probably get Matt Bischoff, considering that's where Michael Snow went. I feel like Brandon would easily vote for Cochran. Hope and Allie would probably go alongside Eddie and Reynolds in voting for Cochran. Francesca could go either way between Dawn and Cochran. I think she's voting for one of the two. I'm inclined to think probably Cochran, but it really could go either way. And then we have Sherry potentially getting the votes of her former alliance in Julia, Laura, and Shamar, though even then, I don't even think she's locked in to get Julia and Laura's votes, where even them, I think, could vote for Cochran. So again, Cochran definitely runs away with this vote here. Shouldn't be that close. Next up for Blood versus Water, obviously we have loved ones involved here, so I do think Marissa votes for Jervis. Maybe, at least. Brad would obviously vote for Monica. And also, I think along with that comes Colton and Kat, these two players that she played with on One World that she had a relationship with. So I think they will probably vote for Monica. Tyson obviously gets Rachel. And I think he also gets Candace and John, considering I feel like they would be people that would respect Tyson's game and also had a relationship with Rachel. Rupert and Laura, I feel like, are a bit up for grabs, where I could definitely see them going for Monica. But I could also see a world where, like, Rupert and Jervis have a connection through being, like, old school players. But also, like, Rupert and Tyson were on Heroes vs. Villains together, so maybe they had some sort of connection. Who really knows? So I think they could go either way. But I do think Tyson very handily wins this jury vote as well, potentially winning in a, 12-4-1 vote here. Next up, for Survivor Cagayan, we do have some pretty locked in Woo votes from Cliff and Lindsay. I can also see Jatia voting for Woo, considering her closest ally, and Tasha was very anti-Tony. But I do feel like the rest of the votes probably lean Tony. I think Alexis is pretty locked in for voting for a player like Tony. I think Bryce is a locked Tony vote. And then Garrett and David, I think, are also people that are inclined to vote for a player like Tony. So Tony should win a vote like this 12-4. Next up, we got San Juan del Sur, where obviously Natalie would get Nadia's vote. I think she would also get the votes of Drew, Kelly, and along with Kelly, also Dale. Especially considering Dale hated both Jacqueline and Missy. I do think Val could go either way between Natalie and Jacqueline. I mean, she had a closer personal relationship with Jacqueline, though Jeremy was obviously very close to Natalie, so it could go either way. And John Rocker and Julie are a bit up for grabs, though I think they're probably unlikely to vote for Natalie. Could potentially vote for Jacqueline, but again, who really knows? Either way, Natalie should still handily win this, with her having an additional 4 votes, with her having at least 9 votes in this situation. Next up, for Survivor Worlds Apart, we do have a couple people that have some locked votes. I think Kelly is a locked vote for Mike. I think Carolyn gets the votes of Joaquin, Max, and So. I think Lindsay is probably debating between Mike or Carolyn. I would be inclined to say that she would vote for Mike. However, considering her closest ally in Sierra votes for Carolyn, it definitely could go that way as well. And I feel like Nina and Vince are completely up for grabs. But this is a situation where, if I were to guess, I would say Nina probably would vote for someone like a Carolyn, but I do think Vince is probably more inclined to vote for Mike, which would easily hand Mike the win at this point. So I think Mike is still the very likely winner in this scenario, but I do think Carolyn gets some more votes. Now for Cambodia, we have a bit of a train wreck where I feel like votes are probably going all over the place. I feel like Woo is pretty likely to vote for Tasha. Obviously, Tasha's one of the only people to vote for him the first time around, and also they had a good relationship, so I think that's likely. I think Terry is someone very likely to vote for Jeremy. I think the likes of Jeff Farner, PG, Monica, and Vetus, I think all of them could go either way. I mean, I could definitely see Monica holding resentment towards Jeremy, but also I could see her having some respect for him. Varner was closer to Spencer, so maybe go there, but I know he was also pro-Jeremy. PG also was closer to Spencer, but never really got the opportunity to talk to Jeremy. And then Vetus was someone that was very close to Spencer preseason, but obviously just got burnt by him. So again, who really knows? I think Shireen would probably vote for Spencer, but really, I mean, it's never going to be enough anyway. Jeremy should still handily win this jury vote. Next up for Rong, we have some votes going all over the place. Now, I guess we are adding Neil back to the jury, so he obviously votes Aubrey. I think Anna is a pretty locked-in Michelle vote. I think Caleb is probably a locked-in Ty vote. I think Liz and Peter are a bit interesting, where I think they could go either way between like an Aubrey or Ty. I don't think they're super likely to vote for Michelle. Again, you never really know. Alicia, someone I feel like she would vote for Michelle. That seems the type of person that Alicia would respect. Really don't know about Darnell or Jennifer, who never met any of the final three. But again, I feel like this is another situation where like votes are kind of just flying all over the place. Obviously, Michelle would have the inherent advantage considering she already won a jury vote, so she would need less votes to win, and considering the fact that I think she gets Anna and Alicia, and isn't out of the running to get someone like a Darnell's vote, or even a Jennifer who had her allies vote for Michelle. Again, like it's definitely looking good for Michelle here, with routes for a potential Aubrey win. Next up for Survivor, Millennials versus Gen X. I do think we get Hannah and Ken getting some votes. I think Michaela is a very likely Hannah vote. I think Ken is very likely to get Cece, maybe Lucy, maybe Rachel. Paul could vote Ken, but that one's a bit more up for grabs considering all of Paul's allies did end up voting for Adam. But then I think Figgy and Mari do vote for Adam. And I think Figgy and Mari still pretty clearly vote for Adam, to which he still should handily win a jury vote here. Next up for Game Changers, I again think all three players here are likely to get some extra votes. I think Troyzan is likely to get the votes of Sandra and Varner, considering they had a pre-game relationship. I think JT and Sierra are very likely to vote for Brad. JT obviously due to the in-game relationship, and Sierra due to their pre-game relationship. Obviously Tony votes for Sarah. I think Caleb probably leans towards voting for Brad. And I think you got Malcolm, who really could go either way. I mean, he only spent time with Troyzan, but didn't seem to have that great a relationship with him. And I could definitely see him respecting both Brad and Sarah's game. So it's a bit up in the air with Malcolm, but realistically, Sarah still wins pretty handily, with her not really needing to pick up many votes here. Next up for HHH, we do have, again, a couple locked in votes for some people. I think Katrina probably votes Chrissy, considering Katrina thought she was close to Chrissy, so maybe. I could see the former Hustlers leaning towards Ryan, but also I feel like Allie was very burned by Ryan, to where I could see her not wanting to vote for Ryan. I know she was very anti-Chrissy, so maybe she goes for Ben. Simone is another one that I think Simone could respect someone like a Chrissy, to where maybe she would go for Chrissy. But really, I think Ben should still handily win this. Obviously getting the majority already, but then also I think he would get the votes of Jessica. Probably get the vote of Rourke, considering Rourke was also anti-Chrissy and Ryan. And then Alan Ball is a pretty locked-in Ben vote. So I think Ben still runs away with it. Next up for Ghost Island, this is one that is very much up for grabs, where I do feel like Morgan is a pretty locked Dominic vote. You have Bradley, who I think is between Wendell and Dominic. I'm a bit unsure of exactly where he would land, but I think he would lean Dominic, considering Dominic's the one that actually got him out. And I think we have the votes of all the old Malolos that really could go anywhere. I think James, Stephanie, Brendan, Jacob Derwin, and Stephanie Gonzalez, all those people could potentially vote for Laurel as the old Malolo, but I feel like they would even be in this position where they would feel like those votes would be kind of wasted. And through that, who really knows where the votes really go? However, I do feel like the further away people were from the game, the more impressed those people were with Dominic's game. Where again, something if you look at the jury, is that the first 5 jurors voted for Dominic, the last 5 jurors voted for Wendell. So through that, I could definitely see the Malolo players look at the game in a similar way, and through that vote for Dominic. I mean, obviously we did see even Michael, Libby, and Jenna all vote for Dominic. So I think that's probably likely where their votes end up landing here, and Dominic ends up being a pretty likely winner in this scenario. Next up for David versus Goliath, I think this one's mostly simple. I mean, I think Jeremy is a locked-in vote for Mike, but I think Lyrsa, B, Jessica, and Pat are all pretty likely Nick votes, being former David's. And while Natalie and Natalia are a bit more up for grabs, where I do think Natalie probably leans Mike, Nick should still easily win this jury vote here. Next up for Edge of Extinction, we have only 2 people that weren't on the jury, so I mean this should be pretty easy. I think Keith easily votes for Chris. I think that's pretty locked in. Wendy could go for Chris, but I think could also go for Gavin. I mean, Wendy did seem to have a good relationship with Gavin, Eric, and Victoria on her SWAT tribe, to where like I could definitely see her vote going to Gavin, but really it doesn't matter. Chris still wins. Next up from IOI, still get a Tommy win, but again, some votes could go in different directions. I mean, I guess we're adding Dan back to the jury, to which he's a locked vote for Tommy. Jason is a locked vote for Tommy. I think Molly is a very likely vote for Tommy, considering she never met Dean. I think Tom is a locked vote for Dean, and I think you got Chelsea, Vince, and Ronnie, who could technically go either way. I mean, they did only spend time with Dean, but definitely had reasons to not vote for Dean. I think Chelsea's probably more inclined to vote for Dean, I guess, but really the other 2 could go either way, but again, Tommy still has the win at this point. Next up for Winners at War, and there's literally only 1 person that was on the jury, and this one's so easy. Sandra votes for Tony. It's not even a question. Now for 41, we have a decent amount of votes that are up for grabs. I mean, I do think Sydney is a locked vote for Deshaun. I think Voce and Abraham are very likely votes for Xander. But then we're at the booted UA players, who I think really could go anywhere. Now, obviously, Erica has the advantage to begin with, to where, again, like it would be tough to really catch up to Erica. So Erica's still likely going to win. But again, exactly where these votes go is up for grabs. I mean, I think Jeannie and Brad are probably likely Erica votes, considering I could just see them following along with the majority. Though, too, for Brad had a connection with Xander through the Beware advantage, so maybe that plays a factor. JD, I think, could literally vote for anybody. I mean, I think he could vote for Deshaun, Xander, or Erica. I think he has commonalities with all of them, so it's like, again, could go either way. Sarah, I mean, again, not really solid on where she would go, but I'm inclined to think Erica still wins anyway. Just, again, I feel like a lot of these votes are a bit up for grabs. And finally, let's wrap it up with Survivor 42, where here I do think we got some pretty clear Mike votes. I feel like Jenny and Daniel would probably both vote for Mike. I think Marianne is likely to get the votes of Mariah and Jackson, though even then not really a guarantee, but I think pretty likely. I think Lydia could go either way. I mean, Lydia is someone that had a relationship with Marianne, had a relationship with Mike. I think at the time that she was voted out, probably would lean Mike, though who really knows if she was on the jury, to where like Hai would have probably convinced her potentially to go Marianne, so who really knows there. And then obviously we have Zach and Swathi, who were original Ika members, to where like, do they vote for Romeo? But like Zach might have voted for Marianne if he knew about her crush. I don't know. I think it could go either way, but I do think Marianne is a likely person for them to vote for, considering the similarities in age and everything. Like, I think Marianne still wins in pretty dominant fashion here, though I do think Mike picks up a couple votes. But there we go. I mean, that is every season of Survivor US, talking about what if every player was on the jury. As we move forward, we will continue to do Survivor Big Brother videos, so stay tuned for those. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.